Welcome to this explainer. You know, if you've ever felt like you and your partner are speaking two entirely different emotional languages, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're unpacking a really profound manual for navigating relationships impacted by ADHD and Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria, or RSD. We're going to base this on a framework called the amplifier. What makes this approach so incredibly effective is that it treats both partners as equally valid main characters, while fully acknowledging that they're basically acting in two different movies. We're going to bridge that gap right now.
So picture this. Imagine a massive sound system, but the volume knob is completely busted. It's not broken in the sense that it plays no sound. It's broken because every single signal of rejection blasts through at a deafening level 10. A whisper sounds like a scream. A totally neutral remark feels like a harsh indictment. A brief, quiet moment, that feels like total abandonment. This intense volume is the daily reality of the amplifier.
To really build empathy and find some practical solutions, we're going to walk through 6 clear steps today. Defining the amplifier, looking at the faces of RSD, stepping into the inner worlds of both the carrier and the partner, and then finally, laying out a practical manual and the duty of repair.
Let's get into it. Step 1. What exactly is the amplifier? Let's take a quick look at the underlying neurology here.
At its core, rejection sensitive dysphoria, RSD, is this extreme, poorly regulated emotional pain response to perceived rejection. It's actually deeply wired into how an ADHD brain handles dopamine. And it's so crucial to hear this. RSD is not a character flaw, it's not a choice, and it's certainly not a manipulation tactic. It is quite literally a missing neurological buffer. The prefrontal cortex just fails to dampen those emotional impulses, meaning the brain processes social rejection using the exact same neural pathways and with the same intensity as severe physical pain.
Which brings us to our very first grounding rule. For the person living with RSD, let's call them the carrier. That pain is 100% real. It's not an act. It's not exaggerated for attention. Now, the interpretation of the event might be totally magnified, sure. But both things are true at once. The cause is that internal amplification, but the devastating, crushing pain they feel in their chest is completely authentic.
Moving on to step 2, the 3 faces of RSD. How does this invisible internal amplifier actually show up in everyday behavior?
It's fascinating because these confusing outward behaviors actually have very distinct inner mechanics. RSD generally shows up in one of 3 faces. First, you have the flame. This looks like sudden anger or a defensive counterattack, but underneath, it's pure panic. It's a desperate attempt to push the pain away. Second is the implosion. On the outside, it looks like withdrawal or the silent treatment, but internally, it's a brutal tribunal where the carrier agrees with the rejection and just attacks themselves. And third, the forward fold, which shows up as extreme people-pleasing or perfectionism.
Let's zoom in on that third phase for a second. People-pleasing and perfectionism, they are literally just walls built around the exact same wound. When a partner is constantly over-delivering, always pleasing, or avoiding any risks, they aren't just being modest or helpful. They've constructed an entire preventive architecture to structurally guarantee they never have to feel that agony of rejection. They are organizing their whole life around dodging one single feeling.
Step 3, the inner world of the carrier. Let's step right into their shoes and see what happens, chronologically, when that amplifier is triggered.
Look at how wildly fast this escalates second by second. At second 0, someone makes a totally neutral remark. By second 1, before a single conscious thought even forms, the carrier feels a physical hit, a literal strike to the chest. Between seconds 2 and 10, boom, a massive 30-year archive of past rejections gets ripped wide open. So a minor comment about, forgetting to run the dishwasher, it doesn't just trigger an overreaction, it unlocks a lifetime of being told they aren't good enough, and they feel all that historical pain at once. Then comes the aftermath, a crushing wave of shame once the logical brain finally reboots and they realize they've overreacted.
But hey, here's a massive anchor of hope for us. The actual neurological wave itself is surprisingly brief. It passes like intense weather, usually in just a few minutes. What lasts for hours or totally ruins an entire weekend is the fight about the wave. If nobody throws gas on the fire by arguing during the peak of the storm, the wave will naturally crest and fade away.
Step 4, the inner world of the other. Now, we really need to shift the spotlight to the partner, giving equal, dignified space to their hidden reality. Because let me tell you, living next to an amplifier takes a massive toll.
Imagine this dual exhaustion happening under one roof. On the left side, we have the carrier's radar, right? Always spinning, constantly scanning for danger, misinterpreting size and random glances as rejection. On the right side, we have the sensor. This is the partner relentlessly editing every single word they say, walking on eggshells, weighing every request just to prevent triggering an explosion. It's two exhausted guards serving the exact same fear.
Living as the sensor requires a ridiculous amount of invisible, uncredited labor. You know that feeling when the lightness just drains out of a relationship? The partner starts holding back tiny truths and minor annoyances just to keep the peace. They're carrying around this heavy backpack of unsaid things. Eventually, they risk losing their own identity entirely, fusing completely with the carrier's emotional needs, which breeds some incredibly valid feelings of anger, isolation, and deep loneliness.
And please remember this absolute rule. The partner's exhaustion does not need a medical diagnosis to be valid or to compete with the carrier's neurological pain. Both of these experiences demand profound respect and space. There is no hierarchy of suffering here. The other isn't just a nurse, a buffer, or a spectator. They are 50% of the relationship.
Step 5. The manual. With both of these realities completely validated and out in the open, how do you actually navigate these storms together? The absolute first step for both people is making a critical distinction. The event, meaning the neutral words that were spoken, and the landing, meaning the massive emotional crater it left on the carrier, are two totally different things. And crucially, they can both be true at exactly the same time. The other must acknowledge that the impact was massive, and the carrier has to acknowledge that the actual event was tiny.
So when that wave actually hits, pretty much all your natural human instincts are going to be dead wrong. You cannot defend yourself or try to correct the record. To an offline brain, your logical explanations just sound like further attacks. You have to follow the protocol. Do not debate the facts. If you need space, clearly frame your departure. Say something like, I am going to the kitchen for 10 minutes, but I am not leaving you. Acknowledge their pain, but don't surrender to a false reality. Your calm presence is literally the only intervention that works in that moment.
Finally, step 6, the duty of repair. What has to happen after the storm clears? Because having a neurological condition is never, ever a free pass for leaving lasting behavioral damage.
The carrier has a really strict duty here, a duty of craftsmanship, to come back and repair the connection. They have to own the amplifier. They need to name the impact their behavior had on their partner without ever throwing the word "but" into the apology. They must outline what they'll try to do differently, and most importantly, they have to push through their own crushing aftermath of shame to actively fix the damage. You have to prove to your partner that they are seen and valued.
But hey, the partner has a duty too. When the carrier pushes through that terrible shame to offer a genuine, multi-step apology, the partner has to accept it to close the loop. You absolutely cannot hoard grudges in a ledger like ammo for the next fight. Keeping a scoreboard will completely destroy any motivation for future repairs.
I want to leave you with this really beautiful balancing thought. Boundaries without understanding, that just feels like cold rejection. But understanding without boundaries, that results in a total loss of self. So armed with what you know now about the amplifier, how are you going to merge deep empathy for this condition with firm boundaries for your own well-being to write one shared, beautiful story? Think on that.